sentence you to a term of incarceration in the Department of Corrections, 16 years.
John Goodman, I'm 52 years old. I'm not guilty of the crimes I was found guilty of.
We are digging more tonight into the newly released discovery report on that fatal accident involving polo mogul John Goodman. Goodman is charged with killing a local college student after allegedly running a stop sign in Wellington just this past winter.
The medical examiner is now officially confirming Wilson died from drowning, not the impact of the February 12th collision with John Goodman's Bentley.
Goodman maintains he was not impaired while driving and only left the scene because he was disoriented and needed to find a phone because his was not working.
Goodman and his defense claims that he only drank after the crash, and that's why his blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit.
The defense claiming the luxury car malfunctioned before the crash that killed Scott Wilson in February 2010.
Just minutes ago, a judge handed down the sentence. The judge gave him 16.
John Goodman is the wealthy businessman on trial for a second time after his first conviction won an appeal over juror misconduct. This time, the jury is being sequestered, bussed in from Tampa.
Moving on, attorneys for International Polo Club founder John Goodman want answers this midday. They want the state attorney's office to tell them why Goodman's 2007 Bentley, a key piece of evidence in his DUI manslaughter trial, was released from evidence after the trial.
A guilty verdict in the John Goodman retrial this afternoon. The Wellington polo mogul taken to the Palm Beach County Jail just minutes after he was convicted of DUI manslaughter in the death of Scott Wilson.
Since that night, John has been characterized as a murderer, as a selfish, uncaring person who only saved himself and is trying to buy his own innocence. Nothing could be further from the truth. And John sits in a prison cell right now because the truth hasn't come out.
I'm John Goodman, I'm 52 years old. I'm not guilty of the crimes I was found guilty of.
John Goodman had two charges against him: DUI manslaughter with failure to render aid, and vehicular homicide with failure to render aid. So let's first look at the DUI manslaughter with failure to render aid. The state's burden of proof was to show that John Goodman was operating his car impaired. The state's key piece of evidence necessary to prove the DUI manslaughter was the sample of blood taken 3 hours after the accident. This is the same sample of blood that the experts said was not drawn correctly.
Can you tell me how long the needle is in the butterfly needle that you used approximately? And do you remember answering, I think it's 5/8 of an inch? Yes. Okay.
I believe the blood alcohol test results in John Goodman's case were faulty because the state deviated from the blood collection kit. The gauge of needle used on John Goodman was a 23 gauge butterfly needle designed for use on infants. A 23 gauge butterfly needle causes blood clotting. The blood sample containing clots artificially elevates blood alcohol test results, making that sample no longer representative of the blood flowing through the person's body.
You are aware that a 25 gauge butterfly needle is known to cause hemolysis, isn't it? Are you aware that do you know if a 25 gauge butterfly needle can cause hemolysis?
And then were there any indications that he was impaired? Not a single witness testified that they saw any sign of impairment with John Goodman. The people last to see John Goodman, the bartender, the valet, all testified they saw no signs of impairment from alcohol.
He got in a horrible accident. He was concussed, he broke his wrist, his sternum was cracked. He went to make a phone call when he finally came to and realized that his battery was dead. Left with no choice but to go find a phone, he started walking down the nearest road. He walks up the stairs and he opens the door to what is essentially a man cave. Sofas, TVs, pictures of polo players, fully stocked bar, everything except a phone. At this point, John knows he hit something, but he thinks he's the only one that's involved in this accident. So he's acting accordingly.
And I was in great pain. I had broken my arm, I had cracked my sternum, I had been knocked out.
Did you just tell this jury that you never were in Chris Campson's driveway the morning of February 12, 2010?
Yes.
Do you recall when we took your deposition on April 1st, 2014?
Yes.
That you claimed for the first time then that you had driven through Chris Campson's driveway after passing Mr. Goodman's location?
After it being brought to my attention about the GPS in my vehicle showing its location in that driveway, I believed at the time that it could be a possibility that I turned around there.
The simplest answer is usually right. John Goodman's blood alcohol content was a result of the drinking he did after the collision. One of the most critical issues in this trial was the claim that John left the scene of the accident without rendering aid. The key piece of evidence here, the visibility of the car in the canal, there was not a single picture taken by anyone in the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office of how the car was found in the canal. Not a single picture showing that it was underwater and there was only one part of a tire sticking out. That same car that they claim that John Goodman knew was in the canal. 3 other witnesses that weren't just in a catastrophic accident, that didn't just have airbags popping in their face, that didn't have a concussion and a broken wrist. Those witnesses didn't see anything. The 911 tape shows they thought there was only one car, that it was a hit and run.
911 emergency sheriff's office. Do you need police or paramedics? I'm not sure. I was just driving home and I just saw this car. I think it's a Bentley, and it's just like crashed on the side of the road.
Okay, where is it?
Cracked. I turned around to go back because it looks really bad and I don't see another car and I don't see anybody. But inside, it's just like, it's the scariest sight. There's glass everywhere, and I don't know if they're going to need help or anything.
All right. What did it hit?
I don't even know. I didn't see it. I just saw it pulled off on the side of the road.
I just called about 2 seconds ago reporting just a broken down car on the side of the road with metal everywhere on 120th and Lake Worth Road.
Are you talking about the black Bentley?
The guys were on the way.
Okay.
And we just noticed there's a car in the canal, upturned in the canal, like underneath all the water. We didn't even notice. He said deputies are on the way.
Anyone in the car?
I don't see any. The car's upside down. I don't see anyone in the car, and the car in the canal. I can't even make out anything, what it is or what. Nothing.
Okay, you can't tell if anyone's still in the vehicle or if anyone's trapped inside.
No, I can't see anything. It's because all I see is the tires. The 2 back tires are popping out. That's it. And the bumper. We should go down there. Should we go down?
Yeah, I want you to go down and see if you can see anyone. I don't want you going in the canal, but just tell me if you can see anyone in the canal.
All right, we're not going to go in the canal.
She was asking you, please, someone needs to go in there, correct?
Yes.
And you told her no.
Yes.
And you're aware that the 911 operator had told the two young men that called, you are not to go into the canal.
Yes,
You felt that someone could have been in that car, correct?
that was a possibility.
I never knew there was a car in the canal until I was told by the police. If I knew anyone was hurt or anyone was possibly hurt, I would have done everything in my power, risked my life, done whatever to help someone, whether I had created the accident or come across an accident like that. And I would never put myself before someone that was hurt, no matter what I felt like the consequences would be.
And there was so much public outcry against John Goodman supposedly leaving the scene of an accident where he could have helped. Well, when the emergency responders came, no one even went in the canal. They wouldn't go in the canal. At first, they didn't even know there was a car in the canal. And it wasn't until an hour later that they came with proper equipment and then went into the canal. And when they went into the canal, they didn't stick their head underwater to look inside the car. They had no idea anyone was in the car until the car was removed by a tow truck. And that was the first time it was discovered that someone was in the car. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, why is John Goodman held to a higher standard than the first responders, the fire rescue, and the police? A John Goodman who has a concussion, a broken wrist, and was just in a very serious accident.
I was painted as a murderer that was trying to escape liability, which is nothing could be further from the truth.
The issues in this case involving the automobile were very complex and technical issues. That's why there were so many different engineers and people involved. What my role was to take the very technical information from these experts and these engineers and turn it into something that the jury would understand. The bottom line was that the computers had malfunctioned in John Goodman's car prior to him coming up to that stop sign on that fateful night. The throttle body on his car, the part of the car that controls how fast the car goes, the part that controls the acceleration and also slowing down when you take your foot off the gas, that part had problems, and the problems were recorded in these electronic control units of the car. And the empirical evidence showed that these critical parts had failed the night that this collision occurred. What is very important in understanding how this accident occurred is that when a car is going 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, it's traveling at between 70 and 90 feet per second. So when this car is not decelerating, it's not slowing down when John's lifting his foot off the gas pedal, it only takes this single second for that car to be through the stop sign and through the intersection and in collision with Scott Wilson's car. That small amount of time, we don't even have the reaction time to react quick enough to it. And because things are moving so quickly, 70 feet a second, the intersection was only 150 feet. So within a second, through the stop sign and already in the middle of the intersection before you realize what happens. And it's true that these Bentleys have very, very advanced high-performance brakes. But if you don't react and put those brakes on fast enough, because you're expecting the car to do something else when you lift your foot off the gas pedal, there's nothing you can do. This Bentley was a very high-performance automobile. It had over 500 horsepower. The engine, while it's producing this power, and it's not shutting off when John's lifting his foot off the gas pedal, it's overpowering the brakes. The brakes, when you have the gas and the brakes on while it's moving, the car doesn't slow down as if you didn't have your foot on the gas. But in this circumstances, the throttle was malfunctioning and causing the car to keep the speed that it was going. So the engine is working against the brakes. We uncovered absolute positive proof that there were these malfunctions in both the throttle body of John's car and also the computer system that operates everything in his car.
I am an auto technician for high-end automobiles. I have worked in many Bentleys, GTC, the same year, the same model as John Goodman. And the truth is that there is a problem.
It was a question like, how could they not see it? How could the state not see that this is black and white? We have empirical evidence, downloads from the car. We have things that could have only happened if there were some kind of computer malfunction and throttle malfunction. But there was this force that we were working against, that John Goodman was working against from day one. And that force was that from the highest level of the prosecutor's office, Ellen Roberts, to the judicial system, they were discounting all of this evidence about how this car malfunctioned. And I remember there was this theme with the prosecutors, with the judge, that, oh, come on, a car like this, how could it malfunction? And Volkswagen, this reputable, age-old German company, they wouldn't let stuff like this happen. They would never let the public be in danger with a car like this. And when we found inconsistencies in the computer, there was experts coming in that were, supposed to be testifying unbiased. They were supposed to be engineers and experts. But what we had was, we had Bentley and their parent company, Volkswagen, paying this expert to come in here to our trial and tell the jury that everything's okay with the Bentley. And it was just such an almost Alice in Wonderland-like world where, hold on a second, we're trying to find the truth. We're trying to show the jury what happened. And the state is not even using their own expert. They're using someone who's getting his paycheck from the car manufacturer.
When they asked the independent engineer from Bentley, my first question was why Bentley should send an independent engineer. Why they didn't send someone from Bentley? When they asked him if he's aware or if he knew there is any problem at all with his cars, he said no. So I say he's lying. He's a liar. I don't want people to think just because it's a $300,000 car or a high-end car, it doesn't have problems. It has problems just like any other car. As a matter of fact, they require more maintenance than any other vehicle. And when the problems occur, they are bigger than a regular vehicle because they're high performance.
This case is unique in the history of criminal prosecutions. We have, for the first time, the state allowing in a criminal prosecution a private company to supply the money for the person who is testifying for the state. So an interesting side note, the John Goodman trial is going on during the height of the Occupy Wall Street movement. The mainstream media has designated him as one of those despised 1%ers.
You start reading these things that doesn't represent me at all, and it was just made for good media, and they didn't really care about the truth or care about my character or what I had done prior to that. They just started that night and turned me into a monster.
We have all of the people of Wellington, all of the media, turned against John Goodman because of their perception that he's a billionaire and part of this infrastructure. The public hates him. But what the public is in the dark about is that the state's case and the state's experts are being financed by the second largest auto manufacturer in the world, Volkswagen Corporation. They are paying for the experts that are testifying in his trial. We were surprised to learn that Thomas Livernoy, the Bentley paid expert, was allowed to disassemble the car. There was no camera. There was no one from the defense team to see any of this. It was done in secret at night when the Bentley expert flew in. When we were inspecting the car, we had a camera crew from the state. We had the deputy who was in charge of the investigation, the detective in charge of the investigation. We had one of the prosecutors there. And under their watchful eye, we were not allowed to touch the car with any tools other than the software download tool. What was shocking to the defense was that first that the judge allowed this last-second expert to come in. But even more shocking is the fact that he is allowed to do these things to the car that we were not allowed to do. Not only was he allowed to work on the car and disassemble the car, we weren't present to see what he was doing. The head prosecutor on this case, Ellen Roberts, she described John Goodman's car as the murder weapon. She called it the instrumentality of death. And using this language, she was able to convince Judge Colbath of the importance and the sanctity of preserving this evidence and not letting the defense do things to this car. That no one should touch this because this was the prime piece of evidence that the state was going to use to prove John Goodman's guilt. The state actually went through the trouble of getting the judge to write an order. This order demanded that the parties not move this very important piece of evidence. And going against a judge's order, you could be even jailed for it. It's criminal contempt. Any prosecutor, any lawyer who practices criminal law knows you have to obey the judge's order. The irony here was that the order was requested by the same prosecutor who allowed Bentley's person to examine the car. We brought this to the judge. The judge simply denied our objection and sided with the state. As bad as it was to be ruled against our objection relating to what they did with the Bentley, it pales in comparison to what happened next. What happened next is the state, under the direction of Ellen Roberts and Detective Snellgrove, released the Bentley to the insurance company while appeals of the case were pending. That piece of evidence that was the most critical piece of evidence, the piece of evidence that was the murder weapon, the piece of evidence that was the instrumentality of death that the state went through such great lengths to prevent the defense from moving, from working on, from touching, from disassembling. This piece of evidence was released from custody of the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office to the insurance company. That in and itself is egregious. The state has an affirmative duty to preserve and protect evidence. Every criminal defendant today, or 99.999% of them, appeal their convictions. And the state knows this. The Sheriff's Department knows this. That's why evidence is kept in safekeeping pending these appeals, because many of them wind up in new trials. And that they're going to need this evidence again. So why is this car so important to the defense for the second trial. It was critical to the defense because we only learned about what Bentley and Volkswagen had done during the trial. We didn't have the opportunity to do those things. So this was very important to the defense for the next trial to do exactly what this Bentley guy did. When a new trial is granted by the appellate division, it means the first trial didn't even happen. It starts fresh, it starts new. That's what the appellate division wants to happen. It's not supposed to have any of the baggage, the mistakes, the legal errors that were made during the first trial. Well, John Goodman didn't get a new trial. John Goodman got the old trial with greater disadvantage because he didn't have the car. The piece of evidence that Ellen Roberts said proves John Goodman's guilt, the piece of evidence that was the murder weapon, it was gone from the second trial. Now, I use the word bizarre because this story, it sounds fictional. That Bentley winds up in Texas, sold at auction. The engineer, Lucas Sadar, and I flew to Texas to look at the car. All the principal parts of the car are there. What's missing? The two computers from the car. The two pieces of evidence that show beyond any doubt that they malfunctioned and contributed to the accident that John Goodman was in. They were missing, and they were nowhere to be found. So we talked to the person who now was in possession of the car, and he told us that he spoke with the prosecutor's office. Ellen Roberts had retired, and now it was a new prosecutor, Alan Johnson. And he told us that Alan Johnson said, "Oh, we'll get those to you. We'll get those computers to you." Now, when we say, "Where are these computers?" Oh, no, we never had the computers. They were never in evidence. But this person in Texas claims that he spoke with the prosecutor's office and was told that they had the computers. And the anomalies in this case don't stop there. We have one of the prosecutors, Sherry Collins, threatening one of the deputies from the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office and throwing her out of the courtroom because she wants to testify in John Goodman's favor. And where is that deputy today? She's no longer employed by the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office. In fact, she has a lawsuit pending against them. How would things have turned out differently if the jury knew that Judge Colbath prohibited them from hearing that the state's star witness, Lisa Pembleton, told investigators, "I had a dream the week prior of a guy coming into my camper saying he was in an accident and needed a phone"? The jury never heard about that. How can the jury assess the credibility of this witness and find the facts necessary for determination of guilt when this information is kept from them? Another question we have to ask ourselves is, how ethical is it for the chief prosecutor, in this case Ellen Roberts, to be negotiating her employment with the civil firm that shared in the $46 million lawsuit against John Goodman while she's prosecuting John Goodman in the criminal trial? And these aren't my words, these are Ellen Roberts' words in her email to that same civil law firm. "Did you get my message yesterday? I would really like to talk about my retirement and what we talked about. Apparently, this case has helped my career." Whether you believe John Goodman or not, I think we all can agree that the state's job is not to win at any cost, but to seek justice. But that's not what happened in John's case. From the faulty collection of the blood sampled, to a deputy lying about being at the barn when his car was there, to a prosecutor negotiating her employment with the civil firm that shared in the $46 million settlement in this case, to the key expert on the vehicle malfunction being paid for by the company that manufactured the defective vehicle, to the threats the state made against witnesses, the bartender being threatened with prosecution if she doesn't testify favorably for the state, to the deputy being thrown out of the courtroom and threatened if she testifies in favor of John Goodman, to the most egregious, the prosecutor and the police getting rid of the main piece of evidence, the murder weapon, the car, and not only getting rid of it, but lying about why.
I felt like I was convicted before I set foot in the courtroom. I felt like the state took a square peg and made it fit in a round hole. I believe that the people that put me here would stop at nothing to get a conviction, and I don't think I'm the only one. I think that's just the way that they operate in this. And I was a law-abiding citizen my entire life, and I felt like our justice system was fair. But once you get in this system, no matter if you're rich or poor, you're in big trouble.
I want people to know the truth. I want people to know what really happened, and that John did not do the things that he's accused of, and he's not the person that he's been portrayed for the past 6 years.
You're supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. John Goodman was tried and convicted before he ever stepped foot in that courtroom. Did John get a fair trial?